What a headshot! What a head!
How's it guys, this is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, I'll be taking you guys through a wildcard guide to the upcoming Game Week 9 and onwards. So this video is going to be targeted to those of you that still do have the wildcard chip. If you guys don't, if you already activated it, probably in Game Week 8 or before that. This video might not be as useful, but it's still going to include some insights that you guys can gain. For example, I'll be looking at kind of fixture swings if you guys are choosing to wildcard in Game Week 10 or onwards, what teams to target, what teams to avoid, and you can therefore target these sides with those free transfers. So if you guys have had an enjoyable international break, the FPL content is going to be starting as of now, but I've made a slight update to the audio through the international break. So yes, please in the comments down below, let me know how this sounds. I've actually gotten a new microphone. I want to know if it sounds better. You guys know me, always like to make updates to the setup. So just let me know if it's coming through nice and crispy. But getting back to this video, if you guys want to find out when to wildcard, when not to wildcard, sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So the first talking point I want to go over is a bit more of a general talking point. When should you guys choose to wildcard? What are the factors that contribute to kind of deciding to wildcard? Well, I think there are a few kind of general rules. So the first rule is the more general one, basically what most managers say that you should do, or more experienced managers. If you're going to be making a wildcard draft, take a look at how many hits it would take to get that draft, and if it's probably going to be a minus 16 or more, I like to say, then I'd probably activate the chip. Now obviously you don't just kind of look to the next couple game weeks, a wildcard should be for the long term. Just remember, you guys only get one wildcard every half season, so you have to make that wildcard last a bit longer. But as long as you are looking at the kind of medium term future, you're getting the players you want to, if the team is that different to your current squad, it might be worth activating the chip, as I mentioned, if it's a minus 16 or more. If it's a minus 8, a minus 4, you guys can simply just make those transfers if you want to, because that means your squad doesn't need that much of an update. Now in more recent times, I've kind of found this strategy to be slightly more useful. It's to actually look at projected points for the future game weeks. If you guys aren't in projected points, that's 100% fine, but as a kind of stats-based manager, I found myself looking at them a lot more recently. So what I like to do is kind of take two paths. The first path is just use those free transfers, make a plan for the future, see how many projected points you would get for about 6 game weeks, and then make a wildcard draft and see how many more points you guys would probably gain. What I then want to see is a large amount of points that I would probably be gaining from wildcarding, and this has to last for all 6 of the future game weeks. But this is more of a subjective strategy. You guys can decide how many points you guys want to see, if it's 10 points per week, 15 points per week. That's something that you guys have to decide on, and that might change depending when you guys wildcard and that 6-week window. What I'm saying there is, for example, if you were to wildcard in Game Week 10 versus Game Week 16, maybe Game Week 10 is the better week to wildcard, but then that future planning does get a little bit hectic as you increase the kind of Game Week bandwidth. But I think generally out of those two kind of talking points, if you guys want to go for your kind of hits or the projected points, both those strategies should be pretty strong to deciding when to actually use the chip. So that's kind of the first step in the wildcard process, actually seeing if you should wildcard, but then deciding when to wildcard is even harder. So in the next few talking points, I'm going to try and kind of predict when I'm going to wildcard with my own team, and then hopefully that's going to help you guys decide for your own teams. So to kind of complete the context, I'm going to be showing you guys my current team selection. As you guys will see on the right hand side, 1 free transfer and 1.0 left in the bank. So I've yet to make a transfer this international break. So let's bring up my starting 11 and my bench. As you guys can see, the bench isn't too strong. Would I wildcard because of a weaker bench? I don't exactly think so. I think I would generally focus on the starting 11. So as you guys can see, my starting 11 for Game Week 9 looks pretty respectable, and therefore I wouldn't suggest wildcarding this week if your team looks fine. So that's a kind of very beginner tip, I know, but you'll be surprised how many managers want to wildcard the chip just because, even though their team looks pretty decent. So you guys can see I've already got the triple up of Spurs. They face Fulham at home, relatively good game. My Newcastle asset Kieran Trippier has Crystal Palace at home, that's a fine one. The midfield department, already spoke about Heung-min Son. Got the United double up, yes, that might even be a reason to wildcard because they've simply been terrible, but they do have Sheffield United away, which is a great game. Then you have Mbeumo against Burnley, Sterling against Arsenal, probably the only player I might consider taking out. And then I've got the Man City double up front of Haaland, also Alvarez. So that's the kind of first checkpoint here. Game Week 9, should I wildcard? I think my team looks okay, therefore I'm going to prolong the chip. But what you guys can also do, maybe Game Week 9 is just a great game week for most of the teams. If you were to make a wildcard draft, how different would it be to this team? Probably quite a bit different, and probably look quite similar to kind of a Game Week 8 wildcard. But I would argue that this team has the potential to actually outscore that. So with a 1 free transfer, I can even improve my squad as mentioned, probably Sterling out in the transfer plan. But I just want to show you guys my current team to give you guys the context of my situation. Now a little bit later on, I'm actually going to be looking at a Game Week 10 wildcard. I can't really imagine that it would be that different to a Game Week 9 wildcard. But as mentioned, I think this team could actually outperform a wildcard one. Now let's continue on this talking point of when to actually use the wildcard chip. Well, the first kind of talking point I always like to do is the fixture swings of the bigger teams. The reason for this is that the bigger teams usually make up the majority of our kind of FPL squads. You can think of the likes of Liverpool, Spurs, Arsenal, Man City, all these teams. We own quite a few of their assets. And when they have better fixtures, it's going to be integral to when we actually activate the chip. The reason for this is that they are the more expensive options. You can't include all the expensive players in one team. And therefore, instead of taking a few hits to kind of change that money around, for example, downgrading Haaland to upgrade Mo Salah, you generally can't do that with one free transfer. So that's why you guys look at the bigger squads, the more expensive players, and the team I want to focus on now for a prolonged wildcard is going to be Man City. So the big thing about Man City, if you guys don't know, is they do have a blank game week in Game Week 18, and that's because they are traveling for the Club World Cup in that specific weekend. So yes, a reminder there, Game Week 18 will be a blank game week for Man City, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up 6 game weeks from Game Week 16 to Game Week 21. The reason I want to do this is I want to showcase the fact that you guys won't be able to dead end for Game Week 18, as you'll probably want an Erling Haaland and other Man City options for Game Week 16 onwards. So I guess what you guys can do is dead end in Game Week 18, take Erling Haaland out for a 1 week punt, but then that's using 2 free transfers to get rid of him and bring him back in. So an easy scenario here might be to dead end your squad into Game Week 18, then use the wildcard in Game Week 19, and that's a viable strategy and what some managers are actually looking at. Now don't worry, Game Week 19 still falls within the calendar year. Just a reminder here that you guys have to use your wildcard before the end of the year, as you'll be getting a new one on the 1st of January. So what I'll showcase here is the kind of timing of those game weeks. Game Week 17, Game Week 18, Game Week 19, and Game Week 20 all fall within the calendar year. Now, I haven't just brought up these kind of dates to showcase where the game weeks do fall. I actually want to talk about wildcarding at this late stage of the season because there might be massive rotation over this festive period. So what you guys don't want to do is kind of wildcard in a week where there could be some rotation, and that's why Game Week 19 does lose some appeal, as you guys can see, quite a congested period. So that's kind of my only concern here about wildcarding in Game Week 19 is the fact that we might have some rotation in that game week, Game Week 20. But I guess you guys can prepare for that with a strong bench on a wildcard. But at the current moment, this kind of congested period, the fact that you guys won't have enough time to maybe plan out a nice wildcard draft, does kind of stray me away from activating the chip this late. But if you guys do want to do this, a very comfortable strategy here, dead ending into Game Week 18, then you guys can wildcard and get all those assets in. And what makes it even better is the fact that they might have a double game week in Game Week 20. So I want to bring up a tweet right now. You guys know Ben Crellin. I'm a massive fan of his kind of work in terms of FPL, and he's posted that Man City and Brentford are likely to have a double game week in Game Week 20. So that will therefore give Man City a double game week of Sheffield United at home and Brentford at home, and then Brentford have a double of Crystal Palace and Man City, both of those games away. So let's go back to that kind of a game week planner. You guys can see Game Week 20 might be a double game week, which does make Game Week 19 a little bit more attractive for the wildcard. But then I guess predicting which Man City assets have that double game week might be quite tough. As you guys know, Pep Roulette is a massive enemy of all our managers. But it's kind of some food for thought there if you guys want to go for this strategy. I think the double game week does make it better, but the close timing of the fixtures doesn't make it as desirable as I would expect. But what I will say, definitely a strategy to look at if you guys do still have the chip. As for me, it's between Game Week 19 and Game Week 10. So you guys might have heard me say Game Week 10. Well, now let's go over that kind of talking point. If you guys have been on FPL Twitter, in the FPL community, you guys will know that a lot of managers are looking at Game Week 10 as a wildcard placement. I don't think it'll be as popular as the kind of Game Week 8 one, but let's just put it this way. If you guys still have your wildcard chip, I think Game Week 10 is far more likely than any other game week. The reason for this is we have a lot of fixture swings happening in Game Week 10. As I mentioned, some of those bigger squads do have fixture turns, and that's why it's almost the perfect game week to wildcard. But yes, you guys can also wildcard Game Week 11, Game Week 12, even Game Week 15 if you want to. It's whatever your team is looking better at. But for my own squad, and I'm pretty sure for you guys' own teams, and I explain this in the upcoming talking points, basically the teams you own currently have bad fixtures, and the teams you want to bring in have good ones. So what I'm going to do is go from Game Week 10 to Game Week 15. I'm going to talk about 6 squads in terms of teams to target, and I'm going to talk about 4 teams which might be teams to avoid or have question marks. So the teams I want to focus on for the teams to bring in with great fixtures are Arsenal, Brighton, Liverpool, Crystal Palace, Aston Villa, and finally West Ham. So let's bring up those fixtures on screen right now. As you guys can see, a massive amount of fixtures are on screen. Don't worry though, we'll be going team by team digesting them, as there's a massive amount of points that could be had out of these squads. So let's start off with Arsenal, definitely the team that I would target. Not a lot of us do own these Arsenal assets, as Saka was transferred out because of his injury, don't own those defenders anymore. But from Game Week 10 to Game Week 15, there's a massive amount of clean sheets and goals that could be had. So definitely on a wildcard, I'll look at least a double up, maybe even a triple up. And we do get an extra week of information coming from Game Week 9. So all eyes on a player like a Martinelli. I do love him as an option, as an attacking asset if he's going to be available. So for us Game Week 10 wildcarders, we could jump on that double up in attack. Only concerning fixture there is Game Week 11 against Newcastle, but I think that they could score against them. And I guess we do have some Champions League rotation that could be had. The next squad is going to be Brighton. They have Fulham, Everton, Sheffield United and Nottingham Forest in the next 4. After that, fixtures do get a little bit tougher, and that's why I'm only looking at maybe 1 or 2 of their assets. But I do generally think if you guys want 4 next fixtures, these are basically the fixtures that you guys would predict. And that's why I'm really keen on a Brighton, because I do favour them as a squad. I know their results recently haven't been that great, but I do trust De Zerbi, and I think there could be some great gems hidden there. Those hidden gems aren't going to come from Liverpool though. Pretty popular options. Mo Salah's a definite on a Game Week 10 wildcard. There's some great fixtures coming up. My question is, would you guys double up or triple up with their other assets? Don't you think I'll be looking at someone like a Trent, but at Tsimikas, if Robbo's going to be out for a long amount of time, he could be an absolute gem at that cheap price point. But I personally will probably be looking at a Darwin Núñez up front. Great stats, as you guys know, if he plays, he gets you points. Just hard to predict if he's actually going to play the majority of games. Then we have one of my favorite teams, Crystal Palace, because I am a Johnston owner. I might switch him to someone like a Gay at 4.5 and take advantage of these lovely fixtures coming up. Just kind of a pity at the moment that Eze is going to be injured, because if he wasn't, he's a great player at that cheaper price point. But without him, I can't really see much of an attacking outlet for Crystal Palace. Then a very popular side, it's me, those Aston Villa assets, a Matty Cash, a Diaby, a Watkins are mainstays. But they do have a massive fixture swing from Game Week 15 onwards, but I guess we'll have a plan then with those free transfers. But from Game Week 10 onwards is really when their fixtures do turn. Game Week 8, Game Week 9 weren't too strong, but Luton, Nottingham Forest and Fulham in the next 3 are simply outstanding. So I definitely will be targeting these Aston Villa assets. I'll go have a double up, maybe even a triple up, but so do the Game Week 8 wildcarders. And the last team is me, those West Ham assets. From Game Week 10 onwards, great fixtures coming up, and a Jared Bowen is a mainstay in my wildcard. So these 6 teams, there's plenty other teams that have great fixtures, but these 6 teams specifically from Game Week 10 onwards, they turn bad fixtures into good ones, and a massive sea of green could be had. I guess the only annoying factor about a Game Week 10 wildcard is compared to a Game Week 8 wildcard, the majority of players are kind of similar, but we do have a few minor changes. I guess in Game Week 9, we also will get some more information, maybe there's some shock results and some injuries, but a Game Week 10 wildcard still looks pretty decent. But now that we've spoken about the good teams, let's go over the bad teams and the questionable ones. I'll be going over 4 sides, namely Spurs, Newcastle, United and Brentford. So let's go over their fixtures from Game Week 10 to Game Week 15, and the reason I want to go over these squads is these are the teams that we currently own and would look to transfer them out. So the first team, for example, is going to be Spurs. They have Crystal Palace, Wolves and West Ham as the green fixtures, but then Chelsea, Aston Villa and Man City in between them. So I'm not saying that Spurs assets are simply terrible. I wouldn't be transferring them out. I think if you guys have a Maddison or Son, that's perfectly fine. But on a Game Week 10 wildcard, how many of these assets would you guys own? I currently own 3, and I definitely will be probably dropping to maybe 1. Maybe Heung-min Son's the best asset at James Maddison at his cheaper price point. But this will be an opportunity for me to get rid of these assets for their tougher run. Same could be said about the Newcastle assets ever against Wolves and Bournemouth. Then they could be clean sheets and goals there. But Arsenal, Chelsea and United in between doesn't look too strong. So would I go for a Trippier on a wildcard? Probably not. I think the best fixtures are probably gone. And besides him, I'm actually favourable on the other defenders. But if you guys want to look at an attacker, if we can predict Isaac or Wilson to play, I mean Wolves, Bournemouth and Everton, 3 out of 6 look pretty decent. And they do generally do better against the better teams. So the Spurs and Newcastle assets are quite tough, but on a Game Week 10 wildcard, I'll probably take a punt, go with none of them, and then jump on some teams with better fixtures. The next team is United, and the reason I want to focus on them is because Game Week 10 is simply terrible. Man City is a terrible game to have. Yes, their form isn't that strong, but I definitely want to own Bruno and Rashford against them. But then from Game Week 11 to Game Week 13, I mean Fulham, Luton and Everton, simply outstanding. And because I own 2 of them, could I get away with maybe benching one of them in Game Week 10 and then keeping them for Game Week 11 to Game Week 13? That's the only concern that I currently have is, do I actually need to wildcard in Game Week 10? But I could always go for one of the United attackers on my wildcard. Just one of the teams that I'm up in the air about at the current moment, but on their current form, I probably should be getting rid of all of them. Then the last team is me, Brentford. I do own Mbumo, and I think Game Week 10 will be a good opportunity to get rid of him, as I don't really favour these fixtures in the upcoming 6 game weeks. I think keeping him for that Luton at home game in game week 14 is probably the only solution, and then just hoping in the next 4 that he at least gets some returns. But in terms of my own team, probably will get rid of him in terms of the slot and go for maybe Matoma or Diaby. But these 4 teams I'll probably be looking to get rid of on a wildcard, but I definitely think this could actually backfire as these players could get me points. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Would you guys be getting rid of a Son, a Maddison, a Bruno, a Rashford? Probably yes. And would you guys keep a Kieran Trippier even though he's quite expensive with his fixtures not looking that great? Otherwise, Mbeumo I think is an easy sell. I think majority of you guys will agree with me, but this could be quite an interesting debate. But the last question I will ask you guys is if you guys still have the wildcard chip, even if you have used it, when did you guys use it? And if you haven't, when do you plan to use it? And like myself, are you looking at game week 10? I think to kind of conclude, I think game week 10 or maybe a later stage game week 19 should probably be where you guys use the chip, as between that, the fixtures aren't swinging that much. But this video was also a test for our new audio. Let me know in the comments down below if it's better or worse than my previous videos. But this is basically going to wrap the video, guys. Hope you guys did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like if you did and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys for tomorrow, the ultimate guide, and on Thursday, the team selection, where we are looking to take a 1-week punt. But I'm signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers. Bye.